Hello again guys, and welcome back to a brand new Zatu Games unboxing with me, Tom, from the Honest Meeple. Today I'm going to be giving you not an unboxing but an info boxing of Pandemic Hot Zone North America. This is a brand new release from Z-Man Games. It is a smaller, quicker variant of Pandemic, so let's see what's inside. So you join me at the table for this info boxing of Pandemic Hot Zone North America. This is a smaller, more compact, streamlined version of Pandemic, one that you will find very similar to the Pandemic experience, but with a few tweaks here and there. If you want to know the differences, there is a very handy list on the back. Now I'll pop this up on the screen, I will read this in a sec, but if you want to pause and have a peruse. Basically, the differences between this Pandemic Hot Zone and the original Pandemic are as follows. So there are only 3 diseases, as you can see here, instead of 4. And the key thing is that to discover the cure, you only need to play 4 cards instead of 5. So think of yourself kind of as a scientist in the original game, because of course they could use 1 less card, but that applies to all players. So you only need 4 cards in order to cure the virus, or the disease. During setup, the number of cards drawn is slightly different to accommodate for the smaller game time. There is only 1 research station in Atlanta. There is no action to build additional research stations. You must go to Atlanta to try and cure the virus. There are only 3 epidemic cards in the player deck, as you can see here. There's always 3. The difficulty level is not dictated by the epidemic cards in this sense. It is dictated by the crisis cards, which we'll get to in a minute. The disease cannot be eradicated. It can only be cured, and kind of disease cues can be removed. But once you remove all of them from the board, it can still spawn in different cities. And finally, the researcher and dispatcher have slightly altered effects from the original game. But enough of my rambling, let's get on with this info boxing. So that is the front of the box. I think it looks pretty damn cool, personally. As you can see, notably smaller than the original, and I've just smacked one of the characters out of the way, the dispatcher. So we'll crack on by looking at, firstly, the players, the kind of the characters that you can play throughout. So you have a choice of 4. You have the medic, you have the generalist, you have the researcher, and then you have the dispatcher. So just to go through, so the medic gives you 2 kind of effects. So when you do the treat disease action, which is when you remove a disease from a city, you can remove all cubes of 1 colour, not just 1 cube per action. And you can remove all the cubes of a cured disease in your city for free at any time, which is nice to have. A generalist allows you to do 5 actions on your turn instead of the 4. I believe it's 4 in this game. Yeah, it's 4 actions, so you get an extra action every turn. You have the researcher, so the researcher allows you to give a city card from your hand to another player in your city, and the card doesn't need to match the city that you're in. Normally when you trade cards it has to match, but the researcher can do whatever the hell they want with that card, within reason. And finally, the dispatcher can move any pawn directly to another pawn's city, or you can move another player's pawn to a connected city. So essentially you've got free movement of the different player pawns, but of course it's a co-op game, so make sure you discuss that before you start moving player pawns around. And of course you have the plastic player pawns which match the colours of those characters. So that is something that the players will all have. Next up, you then have the action cards. So a player will receive one of these with their character card, and it just shows the different actions. There are 6 actions listed on each, very similar to that of the original game. So you can treat a disease by removing 1 disease cube from your city. However, if you cure the disease, much like the original game, you can remove all the cubes of that colour from the city instead. You can share knowledge by trading cards. You can discover a cure. You can drive or ferry, which is moving to a connected city. Direct flight by discarding a city card to move to the city listed on that card. Or you can discard a card of the city that you're currently in to take a charter flight and fly anywhere on the board you want. noticeably it is a much smaller board. Let me move these off to the side because we'll get to the board once we've kind of looked at everything else. Now, the event cards, you'll notice some of these are very similar to the original game, specifically One Quiet Night. So One Quiet Night allows you to skip the draw infection card phase. You then have, this is airlift, so you can move a pawn to any of the city, any other city, doesn't matter which. You've then got remote treatment, so you can return any 2 cubes to the supply. And then finally you have, this is borrowed time. So it basically gives you an extra 2 actions. So there's 4 that will be spread across the kind of the draw deck throughout the game. And you could hopefully get one of those because they're going to be positive. Less positive, more negative are the crisis cards. Now these essentially dictate the difficulty. Now the key thing with setup is it depends how many kind of I don't think it's the number that you put in, it's whether you put them in or not that dictates the difficulty. You can play without them, they are optional. Don't use them in their first game, it says in the instruction manual, but once you have experience with the game and how it plays, these will become a nice kind of way of increasing the difficulty. So, apologies, no, look, reading it now, I have got a little instruction manual here, which is helping me out. It actually says that you've got standard difficulty, which means putting one of these in per pile of cards. So there's 3 piles, 3 separate piles at the start of the setup phase when you're spreading these out between players. You put 1 in each of the 3 piles for standard difficulty. Heroic difficulty is 2 in each pile. And these have kind of various different things. So hotspot means you draw the bottom card from the infection deck and then put 3 cubes into that city to get it on the verge of outbreak, much like if you hit an epidemic card. Logistics failure, if you resolve the draw infection card step twice that turn. If you do have One Quiet Night, you just do it once if you play that event card. So yeah, not very nice cards. You don't want to be drawing these. But obviously if you want a more difficult game, then you're going to be drawing them because you'll be using them. Now these are the city cards. These are used by the players. They're drawn by the players. They're all related to the areas on the board. So you can see there, much like the originals, they have the population count on them. Bit of data for those countries. Yeah, there we go. Not countries, cities, sorry. So yeah, they're the city cards. Obviously, notably, they're smaller. They're standard small US board game size, I think. And that's all the cards in here. You then have, these are the infection cards. So again, they dictate, they have a city listed on them, every city on the board, but these will go into the infection deck, and you'll draw from here throughout the game, specifically on the draw infection stage. So that's those. You then have the epidemic cards. So I'll show you 2 of them because I'm going to read the other one. So these are what you're going to be drawing, much like in the original game. So you increase, infect, and then intensify. So you advance the infection rate marker. You infect by drawing the bottom card from the infection deck and placing 3 cubes on that city. And then you intensify by shuffling the deck and putting it in there. So it is exactly the same as the original game, and nothing changed there. We then have the more tactile feeling kind of components. You then have the disease cubes. So I was looking at the yellow colour of these, and I think it's slightly different to that of the original, but the red and the blue is pretty much the same. But you'll get those, which you'll be putting on the board. You then have the outbreak marker and the infection rate marker there. These are a very, very lime green-esque colour. Just going to focus on them, please. No? Oh, sorry about that. But yeah, these are to be put on the board and track the infection rate and the outbreak track. Put those there, and then finally you have the 3 vials for the diseases. Remember, You don't have anything printed on them because you can't eradicate the virus. You can just cure it and get rid of the cubes. But if you get rid of all of them, you're not going to eradicate the virus. And finally, you have the board. This is the board here. It is just North America, as you can tell from the title. And you'll be travelling across here using ferries, driving, charter flights if you're that way inclined. But yeah, nicely laid out board. It is very small compared to the other board. It's almost a third of the size, I think. But you've also got a nice little handy player turn reference there. You've got the infection card, infection deck area with the infection rate track, outbreak track, city card draw deck, and then the cure kind of markers for the disease. I say finally, but of course you also have the rulebook. The rulebook is great. It's only 8-page manual, but it shows you the setup, the key concepts, player turns, and everything else in between, as well as some fine points, and then the credits and the differences from Pandemic on the back. If you have played the original Pandemic, this will be very familiar with to you. If you are looking for a similar kind of thing to Rapid Response in the sense that it is massively different, this is not that game. This is not at all. This doesn't kind of change up anything massively. Yes, you've got the crisis cards, which I think are a nice kind of addition. However, this is nothing kind of revolutionary. However, that being said, I do love Pandemic. However, I wouldn't kind of take it with me on holiday. It's not a travel game. This certainly is. Also, Pandemic can be a bit of a chore to set up. It can be annoying to kind of, just because it's quite a, well, I say it's a big game. It's a standard size game, but sometimes you want kind of that Pandemic experience, but in half the time. And this is what this game provides. So yeah, don't expect anything like Rapid Response change the gameplay up massively. This is kind of as close to the vanilla Pandemic experience as you can get, but in 30 minutes, which I really like. So thank you very much for watching, guys. I hope you've enjoyed this Zatu info boxing. If you've got any questions, do pop them down in the comments below. Do pop us a like and hit the subscribe button to see more content from myself and plenty of other great content creators. Our bloggers are working around the clock to give you as much content as possible. So big thumbs up to them. And yes, thank you very much for watching, guys. And as always, I'll see you all next time.